I want to give a warmer welcome. Oh, we're recording. That must mean it's working. Yay!
Well, I still see the spinning wheel for live stream, but I hit record so that we will have record and have something to post.
Okay. And so there are a couple new folks that we wanted to welcome. Behind the scenes, Jon-Paul has been working very closely with the Salmonberry Trust Foundation and trying to work through leadership changes and strategic direction there. So I do want to give a warm welcome. We already said hi to Allison, but I do want to welcome Allison Graves back to the Salmonberry conversation and her new role with the Salmonberry Trust Foundation as one of their executive leaders there. So welcome, Allison.
Thank you very much.
Super excited to have you home.
Thank you.
And pull away from that flower farm.
Right. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. I appreciate it.
Awesome. And then we also have John Vogler. Are you on with us?
Yes, I am.
Help me, Jon-Paul. Okay, good. And I also want to give you a warm welcome and say thank you for stepping up. He is also helping with the Salmonberry Trust Foundation leadership there. So thank you for jumping into the conversation and providing all the extra support you have here in the last few weeks. And we'll talk more about that as we get into the agenda, but I just wanted to say welcome. And one more that I would like to is Bill, hopefully I get this right because I formerly was a Wodorski. So Jablonski, is that right? Or Jablonski?
Close, Lisa Jablonski.
Jablonski, okay.
Yep,
I was like,
perfect.
I got to get this right. But so at the last couple of meetings, we've talked about the importance of having ODOT at the table, not so much as a co-convener, but just making sure that there's a lot of intersections with ODOT projects, in particular on the North Coast, and there's lots of opportunities for us to collaborate and come together here. So
Perfect.
we're super excited to have ODOT at the table. They have a lot more technical skills in some of these arenas and support that they may be able to say, hey, we could help you with this or navigate. You guys were instrumental when we did the rail banking. That is something none of us had ever done before. And so your team was super helpful. So we're just excited to have you at the STIA table. So welcome and thank you for the willingness to join us.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to be here and happy to help out.
Awesome. Jon-Paul, am I missing anybody? Cal, I think you had somebody you wanted to introduce.
Yeah, and I don't
this morning.
I don't see him on the screen, but we have a new division chief for state forests, and that's Mike Wilson. He's been in the department for quite a while, working under Liz Dent and Kate Skinner. So he is coming on. I think he looks very much forward to working with this project and creating those connections. So Mike, is he on? Do you see Mike on?
I don't see him.
Okay. So eventually you'll get to meet him. And I think you'll like him. He also, I think he practices the art of Aikido. He was telling me that the other day. So all that is the Japanese art of self-defense that redirects energy away from damaging energy. So we could always use that, right? Where you can just redirect energy.
Especially right now. Awesome. Okay. Well, we had a lot of good conversations at the last meeting. And I know sometimes there's a good time span in between and it's hard to remember. Oh, Michelle, you got a hand up.
Yes, I just got a text from Marcia saying the live feed is not on YouTube.
I'll continue to work on that.
Okay, I'll let her know. Thank you.
It's still doing the internal spinning.
Yeah, and I'll kill this again and try a different path for it.
Okay. So yeah, if you can let Marcia know, we're trying. We are recording it, so she could come in after and watch. I know it's not as ideal, but that will be an option. So the next part of the agenda is the review the previous meeting themes and commitments. And so we had a really good, robust conversation at the last meeting and really kind of talked about future of kind of the looking back and then looking forward to say, okay, here's where we were, here's where we're at, and here's where we want to head, and talked a lot about membership, makeup, executive committee, alignment between Salmonberry Trail Foundation and STIA itself. And so I think it would be super helpful, Jon-Paul, if I could throw over to you to have you kind of do a recap, because he's also been working behind the scenes a lot more diligently on all of those things, so he could catch us up to speed on what we committed to and then kind of where we are with current efforts. And then we'll get into the fun planning and construction stuff. But Jon-Paul, if you will indulge me and I can hand over to you, that would be fantastic.
Happy to, yes, thank you. So our conversation in the January meeting really centered around solidifying the strategic plan for STIA and then creating additional structure within the organization that will allow us to dovetail more effectively with STF. We've done a lot of work behind the scenes within STF and had conversations around alignment and strategy. There are significant implications for the business model that we deploy, and especially where we put our resources in the short term and how we stage that so we can be an effective implementer and partner to STIA. So we've had several conversations with many of you preparing for the first convening of a STIA executive committee and parallel tracks within STF that will lead to the ability for us to have executive committees that can have a joint session or council. The goals of that are to make sure that we are on the same page, to close the loop with communication, ensure ongoing strategic alignment, and then also help to increasingly effectively use the relationships and expertise that's represented around the table here, both within STF and STIA. All of that is central to us being effective and going from the very small organization that we are now to a organization that can deliver on a $250 million infrastructure project. So in addition to the organizational pieces, we talked about some implementation strategies. We'll focus today on the criteria that this group established in January and the phasing overlay. So I'll pull up a map later on that will give you guys a look at what the practical application is, and we can talk through next steps. And then I want to note another action item that we had from the last meeting was to develop trail standards, and we are going to have an update from Rockaway soon. That piece is still pending, and we'll bump back up to the top of our priority list between now and the next STIA meeting. So context there in general, we are in an organization building phase. We are also making progress on planning and construction and fundraising. And I think we've got a bit more work to do to really have things dialed in and lined up organizationally. The idea being that we will be putting a lot more of our energy and focus into fundraising, planning, and construction in the not too distant future. Any questions on that or things people would like to add from the previous meeting? Okay. Well, with that,
Perfectly covered it.
Okay. I wanted to add a note on the landscape here. This has been, I think it's an intense time of year, especially for folks around this table. We have people that have just gone through really rigorous election cycles, agency heads who have been in really rigorous planning processes and engaged with political processes, folks dealing with all types of issues. So I want to thank you all again for being here and the energy that you're putting into this. There's a lot happening in our worlds outside of this. So thanks for your attention, and I'm happy with the progress.
Are there any questions, comments for Jon-Paul, or anything around just kind of reviewing where we were? We're going to get more into it when we talk about strategy and composition and structure a little later in the agenda, but everybody good now?
And we are adding in project updates to our agenda, and I'd like for that to be recurring for us. I think this is some of the fuel and energy that we need, especially as we get through these organizational pieces. So I want to thank, in particular, Bill and Jay for being here and sharing their perspective and expertise. And also we have Luke Shepard, who is the city manager for Rockaway and has been an incredible partner. So he's going to speak a little bit to where we are on that community pass funding there and some of the opportunities and challenges, and give us a local partner perspective on the work that we're doing. So I'm going to pull up some slides now, basically just maps that help give us context and frame the conversation. And I'll invite those friends to present with us. So the Barview Garibaldi section, as I think many of you know, is one of the most challenging sections of trail that we have. In our criteria conversation in January, we talked about being able to show meaningful progress in really challenging places. And even though there's increased cost per mile relative to other sections of the trail, acknowledging that if we can make progress on something as challenging as this, that it's really going to change the conversation, particularly when it comes to the feasibility of getting this done on 101 around some specific constraints that we have. So with that, I'd like to pass the mic off to Jay and Bill, and thank them, and especially Jay, for the energy that he's put into having ODOT resources, doing this scoping piece, what the implications are. And I also want to note that Jay is retiring, semi-retiring, and I'm just really grateful for his leadership and mentorship and engagement, particularly over this last year. So Jay, if you wouldn't mind speaking to the upcoming work we have to look forward to with in partnership with ODOT.
Well, thank you, John-Paul. I shall be happy to. And I've really enjoyed my time working on the Salmonberry here for the last couple of years. And coming from ODOT, wanted to target this section of track particularly because it will fortuitously provide significant value for a number of different perspectives. Not only is it one of the most challenging sections of the Salmonberry Trail, but it's also the nexus or an intersection point for both the Oregon Coast Bike Trail as well as the Oregon Coast Walking Trail, Hiking Trail. And it is also a very dangerous section of US 101. And so ODOT particularly will benefit from getting the bike and pedestrian traffic, particularly in the summer months, off of 101 around this dangerous section of blind curves. And so, there's a lot of positive of leverage and engagement and fortuitous coming together of minds here. So we put together a collection that will enable ODOT to help contribute to the funding of the project, as well as provide some technical resources. This area is very tightly physically constrained between the bay and the granite hillside. We cannot expand or feasibly economically expand or widen US 101 in this area. And there's also then the railroad that's being pinched between 101 and the bay. And so with the design we're considering is squeezing the trail in between the rail and the bay. We think we have some work to do on the bay side, and we're working toward that. But there's also a rockery retaining wall. We call it a rockery retaining wall just to indicate that it's actually built out of physical rocks. It was built in the 20s when the highway was built, and that is a historical element of the whole infrastructure. So that wall needs some repair and some stabilization. There's also some historic work that we want to do on top of the wall, where we have the old concrete archway guardrails that have been replaced in some sections by steel guardrail. It's not historic and does not have the aesthetic appeal of the original construction. So the project that we're proposing has three elements. It will have the trail construction. It will have the rockery wall repair, stabilization, and rebuild in some areas. And it will have this historic reconstruction of the retaining walls, which will then add to the overall ambiance and aesthetic feel for the trail and as well as for the highway. So it's very much a win-win project for all parties combined. We're billing this as a safety project. ODOT, right? We've done some preliminary work from feasibility engineering work, feasibility work on both the retaining wall and on the historic renovation, and some work on the trail itself. I've been able to procure the ODOT scoping resources that we hope to pull together in June to actually take a look at all of this data and basically assimilate a much better cost profile that we can then use, that Jon-Paul can use for his fundraising efforts. As we all know, construction costs have gone up dramatically over the last few years, in the last year in particular. So there's a real danger that we're very cognizant of underbidding this project, which would basically be very challenging because there's no real way to cut it or to phase it. And so that would be something that we're definitely looking at to make sure that we're conservative on our estimates. But all that means is it's going to be expensive. We're looking at a $10+ million project at least here. So just to let everybody know. So any questions? Or Bill, do you have any other comments you'd like to add as well?
Thanks, Jay. Not this time. This is exactly what you and I have talked about in my brief introduction here recently with you on ODOT's role to support this joint effort for all road users as well. But thanks, Jay.
Jay, can you speak a bit to how just the process of marshaling ODOT resources for this, having it be on a priority for ODOT, and the relationships in play that help make things like this happen?
Well, I think that the critical piece is, in my role as the regional solutions liaison for Region 2 for the last 10 years, I've been able to develop a lot of relationships within ODOT senior management. And I think that everybody are very reasonable people. And they're operating under a lot of tight constraints because all of our funding has strings. We all know that. We talk about the color of money frequently, and what that really means is that just because you have funds doesn't necessarily mean you can spend them on any project. Everything is dedicated, everything constrained, everything is spoken for, and so there's a lot of challenges there. But the key point is finding the points that matter to folk. And what really matters to ODOT and what is a critical piece of ODOT culture is safety. And we preach safety every month. We have regular safety meetings. It's just endemic in our culture. And so when you are faced with a safety challenge like this stretch of highway is, and it's been a safety challenge for a long time, but when you are able to come up with an opportunity to not only resolve or improve the safety aspects of it, but also provide significant value to the community, to the region, to the state, then there's just a win-win for everyone. And it's pretty straightforward to get ODOT to really buy into that and to be able to allocate the resources, as scarce as they are.
Bill, I see you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Jon-Paul. If I could add on to what Jay described is some of the nuts and bolts on the scoping process for ODOT. So we do have a scoping team scheduled to partake in the scoping exercise sometime in June with our geoenvironmental folks, our hydraulic folks, our cultural resources folks as well. And I also extend an invitation to you, Jon-Paul, and other folks if they want to join us. It'll be like a one-day adventure out along the bay to physically take a look and see the site in person. There is some information that we understand that the city of Garibaldi has, and so I'll be getting together with Juliet and understanding that information so we can take a look at that as well too. I understand there's some preliminary drawings or some preliminary engineering at whatever level, we don't know yet. We're just kind of discovering all this. The process of the scoping would involve us addressing the three areas that Jay described as far as providing a cost estimate to the foundation, Jon-Paul, for your needs. And if you know me and work with me at ODOT, I'm a big proponent on leveraging funds from other programs. You'll find other money and sources for us to be able to apply to these phases, as you call it, and see where we can do the best bang for our dollar to take advantage of those funding sources.
Great, thank you. Mike, I saw you had your hand up next.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Jay. Really appreciate ODOT coming to the table like that. Huge help. My question is around how much the homework that has been done by STIA and the Salmonberry contributed to bring ODOT in. Like, was the work we did around rail banking and the work of the port to work with the rail line, you know, did that help bring in this solution? This has been a long time problem in that spot, as we all know, driving that section.
I think it would be safe to say that the Salmonberry has basically enabled the whole thing. It basically creates the framework within which we can propose the solution. Without the structure of the Salmonberry Trail and you know, as a physical entity and the organizational structure that STIA has provided, we would not have the credibility and the regional support necessary to pull something like this off, because this is ever going to be a complex project. It's going to have, as Bill mentioned, it's going to have a complex funding strategy. We're going to have multiple partners from the state, from the county, from other granting funding organizations to pull this off. And so you really need something like the STIA organization and the Salmonberry Trail concept as a visionary to bring the whole resources and focus all the resources together. I can strongly say and endorse the effort of the trail and STIA in enabling and providing the framework for this solution.
Okay, thanks. Wow, that's great. And Bill and Aaron and Lisa and all those have been, where's Michelle Bradley? That I just appreciate that. So.
Yeah, I also want to, thanks to Mike. I really want to emphasize the role the railroad has played in all of this, both the Port of Tillamook Bay as the owner and OCSR as the franchise, as a leaseholder and rail operator. They are a strong partner in the whole Salmonberry effort, and in particular on this section of trail, and are very willing and engaged partner. And without not only their cooperation, but their energy and flexibility and creativity, I don't think we could propose much of these solutions.
Michelle, I see your hand is up as well, and then I'm going to move us on to our next planning conversation.
Sure, you bet. I just wanted to circle back to what Mike was just saying, and that rock wall has been problematic well prior to FEMA disaster 1733 that shut down the railroad. So I'm just glad that it's been able to kind of come together, and it really came to the top of the jar when the Oregon Coast Trail and the Oregon Coast Bike Route, both kind of pushed by ODOT to do that thing, really kind of locked it in as a primary spot. And we know that it's just between all of the agencies, including probably the Army Corps of Engineers. This is going to be a heavy, heavy lift. So I'm glad to see some traction on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the things I want to underscore in our conversation today and as we move forward is the wins that we have along the way and the work that the Salmonberry Trail Foundation is doing to put those in buckets and make sure that we are building progressively in a way that catalyzes more resources coming in and demonstrates our success. We are there is a lot that has moved. A lot of it is, I think, relevant and interesting to those of us on this call and folks who are inside it a bit more. A lot of that is not things that we necessarily message about externally, but we're really going to put the focus on using these wins to build into more wins. I see we have some folks that have joined in the link here with the Salmonberry Zoom invite, who are probably trying to get on the live stream. I just sent a note out through our newsletter apologizing for the technical difficulties. So that's an update on that front. So welcome those of you who have joined. I apologize for the streaming challenge. All right, I'm going to move us into a pretty brief conversation around the loop trail and the work that's happening there. This work is funded by Washington County in the capacity and project funding that they allocated to us. So thank you for that. We are partnering with the City of Banks, and I see that Marcia joined, and I appreciate her and Jolene's engagement, as well as with the folks on Parks who are working on that effort. I know the city is making a significant investment in that, and there should be more funding hopefully in soon for it. We have parametrics under contract for additional design and scoping work. I would like to see how we can focus on expediting land use planning, and have floated the idea of additional development on Fisher Road that could be a really considerable advancement to the high level design that is in the Valley segment plan. We've got a good bit of work to do on this front and potentially significant funds to raise in order for us to get through the initial 30% of planning work. And in order to do that, we will establish an advisory committee. We had a preliminary conversation some time ago, and we'll reconvene a small group of folks from the county, state parks, banks, and the Salmonberry Trail Foundation. We're also having a sidebar conversation to see what opportunities there are to get trail on the ground more quickly on the loop trail. We all know that this is going to bring a lot of attention to the Salmonberry, and the faster we can get on the ground, even as a soft surface trail, the better that will be. So we've got some homework to do to see what constraints there are in terms of planning, what we might be able to fast track, and appreciate Commissioner Willie's work on that, as well as Diami. We've done a lot of brushing there to the point where it's too much to ask volunteers. So as soon as we have our run of show in place, we will get a couple more bids for mechanical brushing, which should take us to being able to bring volunteers back out and have this ready to go as we continue to move planning down the road, but then also try to find that quick way to get trail on the ground, even as soft surface. We are exploring an opportunity with DLCD. They have a new program for rural transportation equity, and it's not a particularly large amount of funds. It's between 80 to 100,000, and they think they're going to award about 5 of those. So that conversation is teed up with the county as well. The Washington County would be the lead applicant, and then I'd also like to see what opportunity there is, if any, on the metro front, particularly around visionary projects. Any questions there before we pass it over to Luke in Rockaway and do an update on community paths funding? All right. Well, with that, Luke, I'm gonna, are you guys seeing each other as I pull up the screen here as well? Got to find you. Okay, great. Well, Luke, Luke was really a tremendous partner as we were developing the community paths proposal. This was a really important opportunity for the Salmonberry Trail Foundation to invest in this business model of convening groups to develop competitive proposals, learning how to take advantage of the relationships that are around the table here, and in particular, regional solutions access to technical expertise. This is a model that we need to replicate many more times, improve and enhance, but it was a good pilot. And so the idea being, we know we need to get trail on the ground. That is something I think we all feel and look forward to. And there are limited opportunities to do that in places where there aren't, balls of wax that need to be unrolled. So Rockaway is a great opportunity for this. And again, really important for us to demonstrate, us as an STF, how we're adding value to local communities and STIA members, and in particular, our primary funders at this point, Washington and Tillamook counties. So the initial results were significant project funding for path between Washington Street and the Wayside. the city of Rockaway, through Luke's great work, committed match for this. And the proposal development process was dramatically enhanced by engagement from agency partners, particularly through relationships that Jennifer helped build. We have had some, so I will pass it off. I'll pass it off to you, Luke, now for an update on where the project is now. The reality is that due to the inflation that Jay mentioned, there's a dramatic cost increase. And frankly, we're asking our local partners to take on some liability in some of these cases, particularly in this time of inflation. So Luke, I would appreciate you speaking to both your experience in proposal development and our engagement along the way, but then perhaps even more your perspective on, as a local partner, what is going to make this effort successful as we try to replicate this type of model many times over in the future.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Jon-Paul. I see a lot of familiar faces, some not so familiar. I'm Luke Shepard, city manager for the city of Rockaway Beach. And I'll give you an update on what we're doing out here as far as the Salmonberry Trail goes. But first, I do want to thank Jon-Paul. He when he came on board, he really did breathe life back into the projects on the coast, but especially here in Rockaway. So he's been a real asset to help us get things moving. I think when Jay said the costs have increased a little bit lately, I think he was putting that mildly. They have increased dramatically. It's not just inflation, the cost of good, it's supply chain issues. And so when you have cost increases like we're seeing here, it just wreaks havoc on capital improvement projects, especially for local governments like Rockaway. You know, we start putting together some of our budgets sometimes 6 months before the budget year even begins. And so, you know, we're almost in June now. And so some of the budgets I'm working with, we might have started to put together almost 18 months ago. And so when you have changes like that in costs, it really does wreak havoc. So the question for Rockaway is, how do we keep this project going? How do we maintain momentum while at the same time kind of weathering the storm here? Because a project of this size, for a town of our size, if prices go up 30%, 40%, that's a deal breaker. And that could get us in some serious financial trouble. So we have been working with ODOT, and they know all the specifics more than I do. But in short, what we're looking at is amending the IGA we have with ODOT. So instead of a design build for the first half of the project in Rockaway, what we're looking at is a 30% design for the entire section through Rockaway. And what we're hoping to come out of that with is, like I said, one, answer a lot of the questions that we don't have answers to. They make it really hard to plan for a project right now, especially with the cost increases. But come away with something, a project that's basically shovel ready. We know what it's going to cost, just a pretty detailed degree, and we know how much funding to look for when we go for funding. Because right now it's just absolutely impossible to estimate what something is going to cost if we start construction 2.5 years from now. There's no way to know. So anyway, ODOT's been real good to work with, and hopefully we can keep things moving, and within 18 to 24 months have 30% design on the entire section through Rockaway. That is what we're working on. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I don't have a question, but just it's just really cool to watch these other agencies and other local partners step up, and just would be remiss if I didn't say thank you. And we've come a long way, and these are really exciting updates, and appreciate the community support and just the momentum we've got here. So thank you. Sorry about the costs. We're all dealing with it, but
yeah. And City of Rockaway Beach is 100% behind this project. So that really helps.
Mike.
Yeah, I just welcome to the project, and it's great to see you and hear about it. And I think this project all along has been a challenge. Like that, your challenge that you've just come up against is not a new one, and we sympathize and empathize, and I'm sure we'll work through it. That's really all we can do. So we'll try and figure it out.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. One of the things that I hope that Luke's perspective informs is how STF can add more and more value to all of you as partners and future partners. And one of the things that we have on our radar is establishing an opportunity fund and growing that. We have the initial commitment from Travel Oregon for 126,000 and change there. And we need to get that fund up. I would like that to be a $1 million, $2 million fund that we have now, so that we can provide backstop for cities and be able to respond to contingencies like this. Yeah, another thing to mention is there was at some point risk that this project would potentially pass us by, with those cost increases. So the work that was done to revise the scope to refinement, but then expand the footprint of refinement so that instead of just scaling back from construction and having the same half of section designed, it's a win essentially to have from Washington Street to the schools in the planning phase at this point. And then given community pass funding, the increase in funding for 22 and 24, we're going to be competitive for a longer construction proposal than we would have otherwise. So in a sense, getting through planning for the entirety of this section tees us up for construction for the entirety of this section of trail in Rockaway. And that is just an illustration of the many and ongoing conversations that each element of this project entails. So thanks for everybody who helped take this from potentially an incredibly disappointing outcome to a path forward for getting path on the ground. Dave asked a question to me in the chat about what fund or pathway the support from Travel Oregon is coming from. Dave, those funds were established through Travel Oregon Strategic Fund rather than an existing grant program. So it was a very much a relational moment where we had an opportunity to apply for appropriations funding previously and needed to get some match together very quickly for that. And Travel Oregon was generous in leaving the match that they'd offered on the table as seed funding for our opportunity fund.
Thanks, Jon-Paul. Appreciate it.
All right, that moves us back into our agenda, where we're going to talk about STIA strategy, and we'll talk a little bit more about structure rather than composition today. Hopefully you have all had a chance to take a look at the draft strategic plan that we sent out. As a reminder, process-wise, in our January STIA meeting, this was really the top priority that emerged, getting more clarity on it, getting something in front of you guys, and then hopefully moving to either refine it or accept it. We asked who wanted to be involved in taking it to this next stage, and Commissioner Willie, along with Diami and Mike, raised their hands, so have been involved in this process. So thank you guys for your input. Essentially, we are celebrating the achievements of the last strategic plan and using this as an opportunity to foster that alignment between STIA and STF, which is really at the center of this conversation, and I think really probably the year ahead for us. So these plans will increasingly speak to each other, but I think are really teed up well to do that. The key initiatives for the current strategic plan, should this group choose to adopt and endorse it, are to review and strengthen STIA membership, and we have serious progress on that front already, thanks especially to Lisa and Cal. Thank you, ODOT, for your increased engagement. And then methods for creating that integration with STF. And again, that is being addressed now in the creation of the executive committee within STIA, which will allow for more streamlined communication. And then it falls within STF, but we are setting up structure so that we can be reciprocal in that executive engagement. We need to prioritize the Salmonberry Trail as a priority for public funding, especially now with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding. So, I think historically there had been some assumptions that perhaps STIA members would be funding STF as an implementer. I think there's a lot more power, strength, and resource in STF understanding how to navigate the relationships around the table and the access to funding that all of you, that some of you represent, many of you represent. And I think Jay spoke really well to that. We need to understand what the wins are for each of our partners, align with those, and then so that more and more we can have projects in the queue that are not only eligible for funding, but we're speaking to agencies, elected officials about why these are important, why they're priorities, and what purpose they're serving to your constituents, in addition to being sections of this beautiful overall trail in the long term. We have made great strides in solidifying organizational capacity funding, thanks again in large part to our county partners. So one of the rationale behind this third key initiative is to make sure that as we deliver on those scopes of work with the counties, we are communicating that work to the rest of STIA members, as well as internally within STF, so that it is not only perceived as us delivering on these agreements we have with the counties, but how those agreements are serving the greater good and purpose of STIA and STF as well. And then finally, at a very practical level, developing sideboards for the project. And this gets us to operations and maintenance agreements, the financial implications for our local partners, not only as developing proposals and for construction, but what they're taking on long-term for maintenance of the trail. And we're going to look at the criteria that, again, that was established and what it looks like in terms of phasing for construction. So getting down to some practical applications here. So I will pause there and see if you guys have any initial reactions and feedback at a high level to the key initiatives, and open the floor to any questions that you may have had as you review the plan or anything you'd like to dive deeper into. Dave.
You would think we would know to turn on our microphones by now. Two questions. Under the STIA key initiatives, I like to just, I like the initiatives. I just want to ask the question in regard to weighting of order. I'm wondering if it shows more importance to take the second initiative, which is position the Salmonberry Trail as a priority project and make it as the out of the gate first thing versus building membership. I don't know if that was considered. And my second, under the STF key initiatives, wondering if you also should be considering the viable ongoing operation of the trail as an initiative versus just getting it built. I don't know. Those are just my two questions.
Yeah, great point. I'm happy to speak to them and would like to hear others' thoughts as well. In terms of the staging of the initiatives, I think we're looking at 4 parallel tracks here. If I were to make a case for the structural issue being at the top, it would probably be that STIA has been around for a while. I've been involved in this project for a couple of years, and it's taken a slap upside the head or two to really start to understand more and more what these relationships represent and how to use them. So continuing to do that work and really tidying up is going to make us much more effective at positioning the Salmonberry as a priority project. I think that the structural organizational issues are likely foundational to us being more effective at the work of knowing how to elevate this as a priority within ODF. within parts for our county partners. But certainly, certainly open to flipping that around, and would say this is probably a case where we need to be doing all of these things. Bill, I see your hand up.
Yeah, in looking at the proposed executive committee, why isn't the board on there? We're one of the 5 voting members.
Yes, that was an oversight. Michelle and I touched base about that earlier this week, and we will.
And we're not doing it without you. That's why we're not voting today.
Okay, thank you. It just looked a little out of place when I read that.
Indeed.
It is. Dave, is your hand still up? Or did you? And he probably went to grab water or coffee or something. And just to your point, Jon-Paul, in my mind, we hadn't really on these initiatives, and maybe STF had a different conversations, but I don't know that we like numbered them in order, right? Because I do want to give us flexibility as the world evolves and shifts and things, come and go, that we have the ability to make them all a priority based upon what the current situation is, and kind of it's gotten us through the entire project to the point we are as having that flexibility, but not losing the eye on each one of those initiatives. But there are pivotal points where some of those are going to be a little bit more critical than all. So I just wanted to make sure that folks, at least in my mind, I didn't see those as they were in that order, that they're all going to be important, but maybe at different moments. Allison, feel free to save what I just said.
Well, I just want to build on that, Lisa, and acknowledge that just the level of complexity. I mean, it was already a complex project, but this is my first time back at the STIA table for a long time, and to see it expand since I was here last, and the increase of partners, your engagement, your focus, and trying to find ways through these challenging times. I just want to acknowledge and appreciate your willingness, your commitment, your creativity, and flexibility. And this, especially now with increasing prices, continuing to try to find ways to move the project forward in the environment that we're in. So just a real deep sense of gratitude to all of you, and a commitment from the Salmonberry Trail Foundation that we'll do everything we can to keep trying to find ways to move the project forward so that someday we can all be walking on this trail. So just thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. I second that sentiment. And one way to put it is that we are learning as an organization how to best take advantage of everything that you all represent, your expertise, funding streams, relationships. So we're going to continue to get better and better at that.
And the best part is we have so many more partners and commitments now that it not that it's easier, but it definitely makes the table a lot bigger. So just appreciate the willingness to stay in, and it's nice to see all the support, even when it's crazy hard.
So the key initiatives for STIA and the Salmonberry Trail Foundation are intended to represent the agreement that's in place through the MOU between entities. And the very quick summary of that is STF has been created to be an implementing partner to build a trail. And so, when we talk about positioning the Salmonberry Trail as a priority project for public funding, it is having the conversations and being in place so that as we develop proposals for infrastructure, we are good at it. We are hearing you, and that is all reflected in those proposals. So I think we are getting clarity on roles and responsibilities between entities. Does anyone have additional questions, concerns, thoughts about the content of the strategy beyond this high-level key initiatives?
And we'll be coming back with more conversation around this, but just keeping it on the the agenda and keeping the momentum going here. So no questions.
This isn't a draft form, so procedurally, would you guys like to have more time with this and provide feedback? Or is it something we want to move forward with as adopted, knowing that strategic plans are ever evolving and touchstones for conversations along the way? Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Jon-Paul. Just think about the context here, and obviously a huge project, and I really appreciate these initiatives on both sides, the foundation and the STIA. And I just think one of the things that the foundation is maybe thinking about and recognizing is the huge ask that STIA has made to the foundation. And I know why we got there, right? Like, the agencies, we've been going through all sorts of our own, we're getting our lunch eaten by wildfire and by funding and by the pandemic. And so the foundation really we asked foundation to step up and be the implementing partner of a huge project. And so, I think we're doing a good job supporting each other. I think this helps us support each other better. And I just want everyone to think about that and recognize how much STIA needs the foundation, but also how much the foundation needs STIA. So I just thinking about the last 10 years. So
that's great perspective, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, and I do think at the executive committee, as soon as we get that up and running, we need to have more of those conversations. So we did ask a lot of STF and had anticipated they would be at a different capacity point at this particular moment, and we're not quite there. So I do think we need to kind of huddle to say, how do we hold each other up? That's how we've gotten through a whole decade, right? So, we just need to do more of that. We're well practiced, so I think it's just time to continue those conversations to say, all right, what do we do to keep each other going until we really truly arrive at that moment that they are the implementer and the eyes on the ball and the vision is still there, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think the pandemic didn't help. Like, hard for a bunch of volunteers to do complicated business over Zoom meetings. It's been great, but it's been challenging.
No, it'll be nice to get back out there with each other and our neighbors and just start really having good conversations and moving things forward.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, so do we want to keep this as draft? I think that's the question Jon-Paul had thrown out, or do we want to go ahead and say it's adopted at this point as is with the flexibility to change it as we need to?
I think move it forward if we possibly can, everybody. We always have the flexibility to change it, but if we call it draft, then everybody wonders if that's what we really mean.
Can we get thumbs up? I think that's our official. Jon-Paul, everybody good? All right.
We had more than half of thumbs raised, so I can look at the recording if I need to, but it looks like it's recorded. And then I maybe would just throw out if anybody has, if any STIA members have an objection or any serious concerns.
I see Dave's hand up and not a thumbs up, so let's see what he's got here.
Oh. Hey, no, I agree. I'm thumbs up. I'm just recommending also to consider how to keep this alive and bring it front and center. Strategic plans need to be living and breathing and also in front of folks. So just really a good way to place it however we can so folks know that the group's doing good work.
I agree, Dave. I think much like the project updates, I think we should just have it on there as just kind of a STIA STF update each time so that we're pointing back to that strategic plan and making sure we're staying on target.
Dave, that's just absolute music to my ears. As follow-up from this meeting, I will share the Salmonberry Trail Foundation strategic plan that was adopted Tuesday of this week. And so my ask to you all on this planning front is to look at those documents next to each other. If there are areas where we can improve how they're talking to each other, let's articulate that. And then to place the structural issues that we've been talking about within this context, the creation of the executive committee within STIA and the engagement that we are planning between the executive committee with STF and this new STIA executive committee is the ongoing conversation that we need, that both of these strategic plans should inform along the way.
Okay, I think we have an adopted strategic plan. Woohoo!
Thank you. Again, thank you, Mike, Commissioner Willie, and Diami for your input on this along the way. And of course, Lisa and Cal. If I go full
Teamwork.
screen on this, I can't see your faces. So I'm going to keep it like this unless you guys have a strong preference to the otherwise. But this moves us into implementation strategies. And I'm going to close the door.
Perfect.
Okay, you guys have eaten your vegetables. Thank you very much. We have something that should be a little more, that is, I think, fun and engaging, and we are all eager to get to have more of our time focused on our plan of our approach to building the trail. So in our last meeting, we established several criteria. And those criteria are now embedded in this in a map that you see here, which is in draft form. My goal for this articulation of a phased approach informed by the criteria is that it accompanies both of those strategic planning documents and is a touchstone that we are constantly referring back to. There's also potential that this tool can be used for project management for the team. So just very quickly in terms of what it looks like, that criteria that has been established is embedded within each of these sections. And then we have done the preliminary work to inform that data. One of the next steps that we'll do is that I'll take is to reach out to all of our local partners and get their input to let us know if to confirm that the assumptions that we're making about readiness, for example, are shared by those local partners. So what it looks like is as we click on different sections of trail, you see here to the left the criteria that you all established and some drop-down options for those. Local community readiness, local leadership readiness, available funding. We can start to capture the funding sources that we want to pursue, how much demand a certain section might build versus another. So some of this is binary, some of it is relative, and all of it merits conversation. We had safety concern as one of our criteria, independent utility, and these other considerations. So basically those that rise to the top as potential near-term opportunities are coded in blue over to long-term. Now I'll note here that we have a section of trail that is in Tillamook State Forest, and this is an example of one that would have some good utility in terms of access to the state forest. However, at this point, the readiness criteria is not checked. So this one would change until we hear from ODF that indeed this is a priority or that they're ready to move on it. Another way that I would like to, one of the other ways that I'd like to use this tool here is in project planning and have more informed conversations about what those steps look like very practically. So we can load in here the potential funding sources that we want to target. I would like in future meetings for us to, or in executive committee meetings, or perhaps planning working groups, get consensus on the upcoming funding sources, which section of trail we should be targeting for those, so that we can have conversations ahead of time around the match that we need to procure, get on people's work plans who will be contributing to proposal development, and then just a way for us to house data in a really practical way rather than toggling back and forth. between a lot of different things. So I'm happy to pull that back up and dive into any more of it, but we'll be happy to get initial reactions. Juliet.
Impressive.
Juliet, did I see your hand raised?
Sorry, I couldn't find myself, much less my mute button. I didn't have raised my hand, but I was curious what that little green doodad is over below Rockaway. I don't see it in your legend.
Sure. Let me pull this back up. Basically, if we have consensus that this looks like a good application of the criteria, then the next steps that I recommend are for us to have to continue to load information into them, specifically potential funding opportunities. So let me pull that back up. We'll click specifically on that icon.
Yeah, I think it's useful. That's why it grabbed my attention.
Great. I promise I know where Garibaldi is. Okay, so was it perhaps this green icon that is at Rockaway here? And we were just zoomed out?
Correct.
Okay, great. So we can add icon layers to these. And I think that one way that I would like to use these icons is if we have, say, a green icon, then we know that that is a funding opportunity that is either upcoming or open right now. So we could have a nice visual look at this and know where energy is being expended at a particular time. So this one is green because that grant has been awarded. And we can just take a quick at a glance look there. We could have a different color coding for opportunities. Yep, so the way I'd set it up was green is awarded, yellow is an upcoming opportunity that I flag as a priority for my work and other STIA members and local partners in the near future. So known opportunity.
I think that's really useful information.
Excellent. So an example of next steps would be for me to have a follow-up conversation with Wheeler. I know that they just socialized the transportation system plan for Manzanita, Nehalem, and Wheeler. Ask them if there's going to be some time of kind of getting ready to adopt that plan, or if something like a community pass proposal in 2022 is feasible. I have done that. The initial response is we're probably not ready yet, but at the very least, this lets us track those conversations. It provides one thing that's really central for me is the way that this can be used as a communication tool. So not only having those conversations with local stakeholders one-on-one, but capturing them in a living database document like this. And so if you say, hey, what about, have you talked to Wheeler? What about Community Pass? Quick touch point there, update on the conversation. We're all sharing that information on the same page.
Super great tool. Nicely done. Whoever helped with all that, that looks amazing.
Well, I want to thank Brian and Chad at Parametrics. They've been really helpful on the back end of this. So that thanks again trickles up to Washington County for the capacity to be able to work with those guys.
Cal, is your hand up?
Oh, I was just going to comment. I'm really impressed with that tool, and I think it's going to be useful as a visual to show where we are with different parts of the trail. Good job.
Yeah, great job. Thank you, Parametrics. Thank you, Washington County. And that will be much easier, Jon-Paul, to have that visual and all that data all in one spot. And great tool.
Excellent. Well, we'll continue to move forward with it and build it out. I would like to have an ongoing agenda item for STIA meetings on project updates and upcoming opportunities. And rather than having slides and bullet points for that, I can just share this database house project information in there and use it to facilitate those conversations. I see it being used by the executive committees as well. So we have as a key initiative elevating this project as a priority for public funding. And that will look like me having conversations with particularly the counties and agency leads about what other projects they may have as priorities. That's something we can't take for granted. Salmonberry may not always be the top criteria, even for those of us, those of you around the table. So getting ahead of those conversations, understanding each of your priorities and anticipating where we'll be and what we can do to best position each section of trail for that public funding. All right. That takes us back to our agenda and a conversation on STIA and STF alignment, which we've been touching on consistently, but this being a bit more from the perspective of the Salmonberry Trail Foundation. Sometimes this feels circular, and it feels like we are coming back to the same conversations again and again, and sometimes it feels like we're making great progress on those, on these different tasks and conversations. These bullet points were taken from a presentation last March to STIA, so they're about a year old, and we've made some great progress on some of these things, and others we're circling back to with more information and better trajectory. So, for example, we talked about prioritizing sections of trail in each county, and I think we have very good actionable progress on the Loop Trail and Rockaway. And we have done a lot more around how we're going to track and target public funding, but we still have some work to do there. We made great progress last year on volunteer programming, and thank you very much, John, for the work you led there. And that's something that we haven't yet been able to prioritize as an organization for this year, in part because we need to build more infrastructure so that we can deliver on the commitments that we have in motion now. Programming is another area where we've taken some initial steps, and we're going to need to build more capacity before we can do more meaningful work and deliver on any expectations that we create on those fronts. And I am very, very grateful again to John and Allison for the increasing role they're playing in the foundation behind the scenes and how integral that is to building capacity for the organization and moving forward some of these priorities that we've had listed for a while. This slide, I think, comes from a May presentation to STIA, talking about the evolution within STF. And this has been a year's worth of work, and some of these have been delivered on, and some we are just now getting to and unlocking opportunity to do more and more of having new perspectives that are involved, engaging more user groups, and having more diverse backgrounds and experiences and perspectives coming into the organization and engaging with you all. So before I got into the current strategic planning, I just wanted to give this by way of context. And the final slide for a look back is an attempt we made to articulate pacing, which is very relevant for a small nonprofit in early stages in particular. I think we spent time trying to do a whole lot all at once and met the inevitable challenges of that. The intent of this slide was to show that engaging backbone funders, the counties here, again, understanding their perspectives and how we add value to them, how we can deliver on that capacity funding in a way that will help assure that that is one funding stream that we can build around as we grow and diversify the organization. That is really a top priority. We need to be delivering on the expectations we've set there, mindful of the fact that that is public funding and that our commissioners represent their constituents, and that we need to be very transparent and accountable around all of that work. We have piloted a public funding formula, and it's going to be great to be able to do more of that. So we need to create the efficiencies that let us be developing proposals, multiple proposals potentially at a time, and taking a lot more shots at these big funding opportunities. At the same time, we have designed some programming for the organization, and that's gone to a back burner. And rather than spread ourselves too thin and make a lot of apologies, I think what we probably need to do at this inflection point is to pause some activities that aren't essential to building the foundation that will let us grow and scale in the not too distant future. And I'll underscore here this point to the right about engaging the public. We know that this is something that we need to do, and it's very important. It's also something that carries risk, because if we do it and we don't have pathways to put that energy and effectively use it, then it's going to create discontent. And it will be better for us to come out of the gate strong with a strategy and resources to follow up on the energy that we engage through the public. So that is still a priority for us. It's something that has had to be on the back burner, but will certainly be addressed as we build capacity, not only with a coordinator, and certainly with a development director. Which leads us to the current strategic plan that again was just adopted at STF's annual meeting on Tuesday evening. The gist of this is, how do we take the limited resources that we have? Yes, a lot more resource than we had a year ago, 2 years ago, but still limited given the scope of this effort, and make sure that we are setting up dominoes so that those resources are going to help build and build. And the idea is, and this is where a lot of conversation comes into play. So Dave, back to your point, not only having this documented, but this planning informing our ongoing conversations internally within STF, but also in particular with STF, between STF and STIA. So we need to use the investments that we have now from the counties to attract more investments. And ways to do that are to get trail on the ground, make sure that we're doing a good job delivering on the expectations we set, communicating about shifting priorities and how we are as an organization socializing those, in addition to with our funders and STIA as well, so that in the midterm, we're prepared for exponential growth. We need to do, in other words, we need to be doing organization building that allows us to facilitate the capture of a lot more funding in the future. If we, the Rockaway example as a pilot is great. If we do one of those a year, then in 87 years, we'll have a trail that goes 87 miles. So we need to scale, right? We need to be able to do more of this together. We will continue to move forward with the loop trail planning and be engaged with Rockaway, and be engaged with ODOT on the Barview Garibaldi piece, and move the extension trail forward around the creamery. And those are the existing priorities right now, where we'll be focused. And I think those are the right priorities, and that they're going to lead to more demand in both communities and both counties. A lot of our effort, especially lately, and I think realistically, I'd love for Allison and John to speak to this. We're going to have some more time of building capacity within the organization, both with staffing, board capacity, my role, prioritizing things and communicating those priorities, and then having the support that we need to deliver on the existing promises that we have and the growth trajectory that we need to deliver so that we can scale in the midterm. Part of that, of course, is an opportunity fund, which you guys have heard about. I can give an update on our fundraising piece, and I think more of that will be shaping up over the next few months. And we've set a target for end of summer for some milestones around that work. And then we have some elements here that are dovetailed very specifically with the STIA strategic plan as well. Allison, I think I saw a hand raise from you.
Yeah, thanks, Jon-Paul. So just to kind of answer or fill in a little bit about where STF is. So John's been on the board for 6 months or so, and I joined the board a couple of months ago. So, we're still wrapping our arms around the project with Jon-Paul's help and the rest of the board. And to kind of build on what Jon-Paul was saying, you know, our primary aim really is to build not just board capacity and organizational infrastructure. It's still a very young organization, and there's some, you know, basic foundational pieces, policies and procedures that we need to establish so that we can be good stewards of the people and the funding that will be coming our way. And then to build out the staff capacity. So those are urgent concerns for us, and we're working as quickly as we can to do a very good job of further establishing this organization to be a good partner for a really important public project that is leveraging not just the private funds and securing funds from individuals and corporations brings with it as, you know, a responsibility, and that is increased when it comes to public funds. So we're well aware of the responsibility that we have to be good stewards and managers and partners to all these different groups. So we're working hard on it. It's going to take time, but we're committed to being good stewards with you and for this this project.
Thank you, Allison. Bill.
Yeah, just a quick question with STF. I know when Salmonberry, when our intergovernmental agency got put together, we hired Portland State to help us. Would the foundation have any interest in contracting with Portland State to help draft some of those documents and put things forward? It seems like they were immensely helpful for STIA.
Yeah, great question. I'll defer to you, Allison.
Yeah, possibly. I maybe offline, Bill, I'll follow up with you and ask you more about that. I have some experience working with nonprofits, and so, you know, and we've got a few people that we're talking with to help us, but it's always good to have more opportunities and connections. So I'll follow up with you offline. Is that okay? Thank you.
I thought he was raising his hand to volunteer, actually. But I want to just express extreme gratitude for the support and the partnership, and knowing that the two of you have only been swimming at this a couple months, and I know you've had passion for it for a long time. And you know, you're not alone. We've asked a lot out of STF from the STIA standpoint, and so I just want to reconfirm that commitment to say, like, let's come together to figure out how to do this. Is how we got where we are, right? Is the old foundation, which was part of the Tillamook Heritage, Tillamook Forest, help me, Mike, Tillamook Forest Heritage Center.
Trust, yeah. Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust.
You know, we've gotten very creative. Thank you. We've gotten very creative, and so we'll figure out how to support and do what we can there. So we just appreciate the partnership and the focus on getting us aligned a little differently and more focused on the trail. And I love the responsibility and the stewardship and partnership piece, because we really are in this together.
And I see Lori Wiggles here. We renamed the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust, the State Forest Trust of Oregon. And I know that she and the trust have been real helpful in guiding and helping launch the Salmonberry Trail Foundation. So Lori, thanks for being here too.
Yes, and that would also be another great resource, Allison, to people love to let you steal their ideas and make them better.
I've been fortunate to have a couple of conversations with Lori and many conversations with Sean Morford before she retired. And we do have a folder with Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust organizational documents. Commissioner
Scar.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just going to say, Allison, I am a past executive director in a nonprofit and have 20 plus years of history. So I would be delighted to visit with you. And Jon-Paul and I have been talking about this as looking at how do we bring the foundation to scale? What does that look like? I would be happy to share what I know.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll connect with you as well.
See, that's the beauty of this table. You get more help than you want.
We'll take it. Well, I'm going to just pull up a last slide here that I had on planning. And then I think that's a really good segue actually to, we've had a conversation around strategy and structure within STF, within STIA today. And we're having similar conversations within STF, and that includes board composition and intentional integration at the right level with STF. All I would like to say really in wrapping up this planning conversation is to acknowledge that STF needs to grow, and we need to grow exponentially. And that growth will probably look like not an ongoing exponential growth in, say, staffing for the foundation, but finding the right level of capacity internally and using our partnerships correctly, so that as we continue to, as we dial in our systems and processes and have the relationships we need to capture more public funding, we have essentially a lot more of that funding going towards construction projects. There will be more funding that needs to go towards planning in the not too distant future. So that orange line realistically is probably up a little bit higher, but with some relatively minor increases in capacity funding, our plan is to be able to grow exponentially, given the strategy that we have to pursue public funding, to have an opportunity fund that is leveraged for cash match for those, and the relationships around the table that will allow us to be competitive and bring a lot more funds than a small nonprofit would on its own otherwise. With that, there are some pretty practical next steps that we're taking as an organization to make that happen. One of them is is board development. And we've had some very preliminary conversations internally, as well as with a few of you around this table, specifically Bill, Aaron, and Jerry know that they are in our crosshairs. And I think that is particularly relevant, not only from your perspectives as funders, but the constituents that you represent, and the increased dovetailing and transparency that gives this effort to have a few members that are part of both, that are facilitating that ongoing alignment conversation along the way, as well as being involved in those executive council meetings between both entities. All right. Well, with that, I've got one last slide on some of the next steps coming out of this meeting that will carry us into our next STIA meeting. I will be reaching out to STIA executive committee members, and that will absolutely include the port. And we'll have a meeting first between executive committee members on STIA. At the same time, we'll continue to have the conversations we are in STF and with our new executive committee, build some knowledge around the history of the organization, the evolutions, and where we are now, and the great opportunity that we have in front of us, which will lead to a joint meeting between both of those executive committees. And I think it would make sense for us to use the initial internal executive committee meetings to get more clarity on what are the expectations around meeting schedules, rollover time. This needs to be truly in executive committee meetings where we are talking about these high-level funding opportunities, how to prioritize them, and how to be effective, and creating expectations around the work that I'm doing and that increasingly we are doing as an organization while we build capacity. From those meetings, we will further develop the conversation around STIA members that we'd like to add. We have some folks identified there, and I think a bit more conversation around the right number, making sure that we know what we're expecting of folks, and that we have the right, essentially, breakdown of executive committee members versus STIA members. So some housekeeping to do, but increasingly I see those conversations focused on prioritizing effort and access to funding opportunities. And then in terms of implementation, we'll continue to carry forward the work that's happening right now that you guys heard about in the project updates. Have our eyes set on new opportunities, specifically community paths comes to mind for 2022. See if there's any opportunity around safe routes to school, though that may no longer be a fit with Rockaway, unfortunately. And I'd like to take this with your guys' blessing, take the prioritization map that I pulled up, have conversations with city managers, planners from the different municipalities along the way, add their input into that so that the criteria, the data that is within each of those criteria has been vetted locally as well. And we will re-engage the conversation on trail standards. So thank you particularly Bill and Michelle for your patience on that front. We'll elevate that to the top and have a conversation around it in our next meeting.
Great update, Jon-Paul. Are there questions, comments? Especially while we have the STF members with us too. You guys are awful quiet today.
I'd like to just quickly say thank you, Jon-Paul, so much for your hard work of communicating with so many partners, and that map is a really great tool. And again, thank you to everybody else here for your continued commitment to this project. I look forward to continuing to get to know you and learning more about how we can best support this project and partner with you. It's really exciting. I live in Buxton, so I'm also a trail neighbor and can't wait to see it happen in our community as well as all the communities along the way.
I want to address
super excited to have you.
a question that I got privately in the chat, and it is around alignment between Salmonberry Trail and I believe Oregon Coast Trail. And that was a really big win over the past year that Commissioner Scar was involved in, and it was direction that Salmonberry and Oregon Coast Trail be 100% overlapped between Wheeler and a potential point of departure in Garibaldi. So there are huge implications there in terms of how an ask for trails funding may go to the legislature. And having the Salmonberry alignment and the OCT alignment overlapping is a huge step in elevating the Salmonberry as a priority project. We need to be better at sharing wins. I need to be better at sharing wins and articulating those incrementally. There's a lot that has happened. So Commissioner Scar, thank you for that. Thanks for the question that was asked there. Yeah, really tremendous cost implications in the long term.
Okay, are there other questions, comments? I see lots of gratitude in the chat. If not, I think we're actually a little ahead of schedule here, Jon-Paul. So we're at that place of public comment, and I don't know how what that's looking like because of the streaming piece. So,
well, I'm still seeing a spinning wheel on preparing live stream.
Okay.
I apologize. I did pull that up 20 minutes before this meeting. And it still hasn't come through, and I've tried a few different ways. So my apologies for that. I will make sure that this recording is up. We do ask for public comment 3 days before the meeting, so I don't think that would be affected by our live stream. And I think for the first time actually did not receive any public comment leading up to today's STIA meeting.
Okay. It's okay. We'll figure out the technology, and maybe I can see if Chris and folks from our team can help with better support there and see if we can give you some better ideas. Or the technology part is challenging.
Thank you, Chris. It looked easy enough when he helped me before that I thought I had my head around it.
Yeah, no, I watch him do it and I'm like, oh, I could do that, and you can't. So we'll see if we can get some better support. So apologies from all that it's not up there running. So hopefully folks can go back and watch the recording. Not as ideal, I know, but at least there is an option there. So
as remedy, I will send a note out through our listserv where I sent the meeting notice and a very quick apology and note of technical difficulty while we were talking. So I will post the link to this video both on the Salmonberry YouTube page, and I will send it out through that listserv as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Jon-Paul. And so now we're at the next STIA meeting, and I don't know that we've got dates put out there yet. And so we'll get those, we'll get a doodle poll or something, unless Jon-Paul, you have an actual date you want to propose now, but trying to calendar it with everyone in the moment is usually not a good outcome.
I propose that be a very quick agenda item for the first convening of the STIA Executive Committee, and then we can communicate that out to the rest of the group as soon as we have it. It would be great if we can get our Q3 and 4 meetings on the calendar as well. Give you guys a long timeline.
So we'll get some scheduling tools out to you to try to get those figured out and on the calendar so that they're there for all of us. And then we're at that place if there's any final comments from any of the board members. And I would say board members on either side or any of you that have any other final comments, or Jon-Paul.
Always, Lisa, I have something that I want to throw in here at the last minute. And there's so much that I'm looking forward to. I really appreciate the sleeves rolled up work that's happening right now with the organization. I am genuinely looking forward to doing more outreach and sharing my passion about this project with folks who are interested. And one of the most fun conversations, informative conversations, exciting conversations I got to have was with Michael and a couple of gentlemen from his cultural resources team. And I really look forward to moving that conversation forward. And I would really like to frame a communication plan for the Salmonberry around the perspective of the tribes. I think that's a really important thing to do. So Michael, I look forward to following up with you on that. And all of you, because there's an incredible amount of passion and content and expertise that we're going to get out to the public and build that support. Coming soon.
Very exciting. Thanks, Michael, for engaging in that and helping. Are there other comments, questions, anything that anybody wants to share before we adjourn? All right, well, I can't see Jennifer right here, but Jennifer and I thank you, Jon-Paul. He carried the heavy load of the agenda today, but he's been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and it was the right person to really carry the conversation. So sorry it was heavy on you on all fronts there, but great updates. And STF, thank you. ODOT, thank you. The cities, Luke, it was really nice to see you. This is the first time I've actually got to see and hear from you. So it was really nice to see the community involvement and support. And I know it's been a rough couple of years as we've tried to keep this thing moving, but there's some pretty good momentum here. So I'm excited to build on it and align here differently with STF and start building some trail, because it's not going to be 87 years. That's not going to work. Sorry, Bartline, I promised you that we'd get on that trail before he retired, and we're still not there, but not another 87 years.
My hope is that the trail will be built before you have to spread my ashes on it.
No pressure, Jon-Paul. Sorry, Allison. We got a big lift. We got this. All right, you guys, have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Thanks for the time this morning.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.